Father, thank you for the privilege we have to be here in Hebrew. I pray that you would bless the class time, that it would be profitable. You'd help students live, local, and distance to learn this language, to not be weary in well-doing, and just help me to be clear, that it would be understandable, and that you would just use this for your glory, we ask. And we pray this for Jesus' sake. Amen. Okay, we have already put up on the board here, before the camera got a-rolling, the imperfect, the standard imperfect, and of course, if you're watching this, just like the perfect of kathav, the imperfect, this needs to be memorized as soon as possible, because you really can't go on unless you know this very, solid. Now, there were no questions on the homework, which is fine. So if you go to lesson 23, on page 103, we'll get this lesson taken care of here, 23, 24, 25 today. Stative verbs, it says, are the types kaved and katon, as well as all verbs with a guttural consonant in the second or third root position have pathak instead of cholim in the stem of the imperfect. What was a stative verb? Oh, use the microphone.
It was
something we learned before. Something in the book. It's part of the Hebrew language. It's lesson 21.
They denote the state of the subject rather than describing an action.
Good, yeah. So they describe a state rather than an action, and they have this somewhat different parsing on page 94, like kaved, to be heavy, if you don't get enough exercise, because you're watching Hebrew videos all the time. You're not on your your bike, your bike while you're watching the Hebrew, So there you have kaved instead of, and the rest of the parsing is pretty similar there, but those are stative verbs. So all verbs that are stated, that was the perfect, state of perfect. All imperfects, like kaved and katon, that are stative, and all the gutturals, verbs with a guttural consonant, second, third root position, have pathak. So here, here we have the standard of kathav. Let's pretend kathav is one of this kind. Can you come up here and just put with a black, change what needs to be changed from this to make it like this one here? Actually, before you do that, let's read this one together, and then we'll do that. So let's go ahead and read yikbad here, which is, of course, kavath, stative verb. Yikbath, tikbath, tikbath, tikbathi, ekbath, yikbadhu, tikbathna, tikbadhu, tikbathna, nikbath. Let's try shama to hear. Yishma, tishma, tishma, tishma'i, ashma, yishma'u, tishmana, tishma'u, tishmana, nishma. Now let's do yivchar too. Yivchar, tivchar, tivchar, tivchari, evchar, yivcharu, tivcharna, tivcharu, tivcharna, nivchar. So that first one, yikbath, is an example of a stative verb. And then yishma is third guttural, and yivchar is second guttural. So he just gives you, the parsing is the same, just an illustration of one of each sort of those. So up here, what actually changes from this? Why don't you put up here what actually changes from the standard yiktov, tiktov, tiktov, tiktavi, ektov, yiktavu, tiktov, not tiktavu, tiktov, not niktov, to the imperfect one in pathak. Yeah, then you have to erase the holums too, though. And the ones that you didn't, that's, you're right. I thought this was a holum on here, but it's the shawa underneath the base, not a holum on a tau. So yeah, that's fine. Good. Very good. Tov mode. Yeah, so obviously that's not bad. You just change holums to pathaks and you're all set. So not a bad difference there. He says at the bottom of 103, a small group of verbs exactly like kathav in the perfect, which are neither the stative nor guttural, nevertheless get this pathak imperfect anyway. The most important ones in this group are shakav, to lie down, lamad, to learn, and rakav, to ride. So that's all there. Any question about that?
No.
Yeah, I don't think that's too bad. Look on page 104. You have third aleph verbs here. It says, as in the perfect, the quiescence of aleph at the end of the syllable has led to the lengthening of the stem vowel. What does quiescence mean?
I was going to ask. I forget.
You were? Oh, okay. It means that it's silent. And then it leads to the lengthening of stem vowel. It's like, if you find the lesson that has the perfect, the third aleph perfects, right here, page 47, lesson 11. So you look over there, but don't say that. Say kathav with me. If you need to look at it, it's on page 37, but hopefully you can just say kathav from memory. But let's say kathav, the normal perfect kathav together. Kathav, kathava, kathavta, kathaft, kathavti, kathavu,
kathavtem, kathavtem, kathavnu.
Kathavnu. Yeah, good. All of a sudden there's silence from the teacher. Now, on matzah, what's the difference between matzah and kathav?
The komets. There.
The pathak became a komets.
Yeah.
It got lengthened because of the aleph. So the aleph lengthened the pathak to a komets. Okay? That's what happened. And you can see, we see quiescent aleph, silent aleph. See how, like on matzatha, the aleph is written in there, but it doesn't have a vowel underneath it. And then in the transliteration, it's in parentheses. That means it's a silent aleph. Versus on matzah, it actually has a komets hey on it. So there it's like it's part of the normal structure.
So by silent aleph, it means there's not a vowel underneath it.
Yeah, it's like it's there. It's just not. Yeah, aleph, you don't really pronounce aleph anyway. Right. But on some of those forms, notice that the aleph has a vowel, and then in the transliteration, there's no parentheses, and some of them doesn't. And so that's how that works. Now, but the aleph still ends up lengthening. It still does it's a little bit of lengthening here in all those forms, actually. But except matzah, where it's like it's same form, kathav, kathava. But so anyway, go back to page 104 here, and you can see the difference between the pathak, the imperfects with the pathak, and the third aleph imperfect is just that the pathak changes to komets. So instead of yik tav, this is now with an aleph. These become komets instead of pathaks. So again, that's really not bad. And then you also have that segol in tikrena. That's something else that changes too, but it's still not too bad. Let's go ahead and say the third aleph one together here. Yikra, tikra, tikra, tikrai, ekra, yikra'u, tikretna, tikra'u, tikrena, nikra. So that's not bad. And then the last thing in this lesson, very quick here. So short lesson, but this is it's important to, definitely important to be aware of that stuff in 94 and 95 here. This is just for these two nouns. This is important too, but this is two words, common words, but two words versus a whole sort of category of verb form. Here, when you have suffixes, the only thing that he's telling you is before the suffixes in the singular, the stem vowel goes to schwa. So bain, instead of the tsere, becomes schwa underneath the baith. Or shame, name, it goes to schwa. Now, of course, the word name and the word son happens a lot in the Bible. So this is worth being aware of because you have my name, Beni, or Shemi rather, and all kinds of stuff like that all over the place. So let's go ahead and read these together. Beni, Benecha, or Bincha, Beneich, Beno, Bena, Benenu, Binkem, Binken, Benam, Benan. See the shames too. Shemi, Shimecha, Shimcha, Shimeich, Shemo, Shema, Shemenu, Shimkem, Shimken, Shemam, Sheman. So what does Beni mean anyway? What are we talking about here?
Banim?
Yeah, the first one.
Sons. Oh, Beni.
Nope, not sons.
Oh, Bane is between?
No, Bane is the word son.
Sons. Okay. So we're talking about the first one, Bani?
Yeah.
My son?
Good, my son. My son, so this is my son, thy son, feminine singular, his son, her son. And my name, thy name, his name, her name, our name, your name, and stuff, and so on. So that's what these forms are. The ones in brackets don't end up appearing in the Bible. That's why they're in brackets. Those particular forms. And then you have to remember the plural of Bane is Banim, sons, and Shem is Shemoth. And those are not irregular in any way. Okay, any questions on that there, paragraph 96?
Nope.
This is good. We only had to learn 96 things the whole semester. So, all right, 97 here we have the vocab. Rakush, movable property, stuff you can take with you. If you're a nomad, it's kind of good to have stuff you can move around. Kana'ani, a Canaanite, or adjective or noun. Mizbeach is an altar. Why did I say Mizbeach instead of Mizbecha?
Because that's how it's pronounced.
Okay, well, why did I pronounce the pathak before the chait instead of after?
I don't know. I've noticed it seems like that whenever the pathak is underneath the hay.
Oh, it's good I asked.
If it's
a furtive pathak.
And you could also see it in the transliteration.
Yes, in that little a, that's a furtive pathak, which is pronounced before, and he talked about that way back in the beginning somewhere. Ah, yes. Roman numeral 27. Way back in the Roman numeral section. See, now, at this point, if you go back and you reread that section at the beginning, you'll understand what he's talking about. But that doesn't mean that was the best way to learn it. But at this point, you would actually understand it. It actually would be well worth doing that, going back and rereading that first section. But in Roman numeral 27, number 4, he says the glide vowel pathak, see paragraph 6, is represented by pathak placed in the final guttural, but pronounced before it. Shemoah, sameach. It is traditionally called pathak furtivim. furtive pathak. So that final pathak, he calls it a glide vowel pathak, is underneath a final guttural, but pronounced before. So that is what is going on. You see where I am?
No, but
No, Roman numeral 27.
the page number?
Yeah, page Roman numeral. Yeah, 27, 4, right here.
Oh, okay.
It's that up there. Oh, you even have it underlined.
See, I would have remembered that
Yeah.
if my memory works.
Yeah, you would have remembered it. If you thought of it, you would have remembered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. So yeah, that's what that is. And so that's good to, I would actually recommend anybody at this point, when you have a few moments, go back and reread that first section because it will all make sense now. That first, all those rules and things that were like when you were first getting it.
See, I knew how to read it, I just didn't remember why.
Oh, yeah, you did. That's good you knew how. That is good. Okay, so back in the vocab here. So Mizbeach altar, kedem is east. Mikedemla is on the east of. Then you have the verbs. And a lot of these are these pathak ones that he just mentioned. Like shakav is to lie down is the one he mentioned just on the previous page. On 103 is one that's a pathak imperfect, even though it's not stated without or with the gutturals. So shakav, yishkav. Batak, to trust or rely. Yivtak, trust, rely. Notice he gives you the imperfects right afterwards, and so you can see that they're pathak, not cholim imperfects. Ga'al, to redeem. Yig'al, to redeem. So this is, that's an important verb. Samak, yismak, to rejoice. You can use that one in real life a lot. You can use a lot of, again, if you use these in your daily routine, it will, you'll learn it. Like if you refer to your car as part of your rakush, part of your movable property, then that will be good. See, and it could be a chariot too. You could refer to that as well. Adverbs, oz, it's not a land where a wizard lives necessarily, but it means then at that time. Misham is min and sham, from and there, so from there, from thence. Ana, whither, to what place? Where are we going? Ana. Me'ayin, from where, from whence. And then you have some names, and I'm much less likely to ask you a name as a vocabulary word. Okay, any questions on lesson 23?
For the pathak under the guttural, I've never seen it under like a resh. Does that still rule there?
No.
I've only seen it.
Yeah,
under the head.
I can't recall any place. I don't think it goes under resh.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it does. Any other questions?
That's all for me.
Hey, by the way, notice on page 105 that Baith ale. You can see Baith is the word. What does Baith mean? It's the last vocab word, the name there.
House.
And what is ale?
God.
Yeah, so the house of God. You can see right there, Baith ale, house of God. So it's not a that bad name for a congregation. Call themselves house of God. All right. Let's go to lesson 24. And it's great that we get to cover this because once you learn what's in lesson 24 here, you actually have made tremendous progress towards actually being able to read the Bible because there are huge numbers of these narrative sequences in the Bible. So, on 107, he says the narrative sequences. Peculiar to Hebrew among the Semitic languages, the narrative sequences, as we shall call them, involve a complementary use of the two verbal conjugations, the perfect and the imperfect. The translation values given for the perfect and imperfect are in no way altered by the following discussion, as long as the verb in question does not stand in one of the sequences we shall describe. So all he's saying there is that what we're about to learn only applies to these situations, otherwise nothing has changed. Okay? So the perfect means when you think of the perfect, what does the perfect typically mean? Like, let's say kathav, what does that mean?
He wrote.
He wrote, past tense.
Past tense.
Yiktov, what does that mean?
he will write future tense.
He will write, or maybe habitual once in a while. But yeah, he will write. So past, future type situation. That's the normal thing. We're going to learn here in these sequences, things change. But when it's not specifically these, all he's saying there is that nothing changes. And you're going to, when you start reading the Bible, you're going to get so used to these sequences you don't even really think about it a whole lot. But so first sequence is the perfect plus imperfect sequence. He says that is used mainly for past tense narration and is extremely common throughout the Old Testament. The mark of this sequence is a special form of the conjunction, wow, pathak plus doubling, joining the verbs in the sequence. So the normal form of the word and is what? What's the normal form of and?
Wow, shawa.
Good. Wow, shawa. So normally you have the word and, it's just wow, shawa. So when you have this perfect plus imperfect narrative sequence, you have a special form of wow. So it's wow, pathak plus doubling in the next constant. So this is a tau. Okay? So this is the conjunction wow is now wow, pathak plus doubling in the next consonant instead of just being wow, shawa. And so that special form of the conjunction joins the verbs, and such verb sequences can continue for dozens of clauses, each of which, if it is part of the main narrative, begins with the verb. Notice he puts that in italics because that's the essential feature of the sequence here. In the imperfect, with the conjugation, with the conjunction prefixed. So there it says, the man arose and sought. Kam, he arose, ha'ish, so the man arose, wa'yid rosh, and sought. And the reason he translated it as sought instead of and will seek will be explained very shortly. But there, notice on the imperfect form of the verb to seek there, yid rosh, notice the pathak there, the word and, is wow pathak plus the doubling of the next consonant, the yod. Notice the dagesh forte in the yod. Or he stood and called. Amad wa yik ra. And there, again, the translation value for called will be explained in a second. But notice there again, you have wow pathak plus the doubling of the yod. And you could have this continue for a long time. You could have clause after clause where you have this wow at the beginning of a clause. He says there the subject need not be the same in each clause. He sat down near the temple, the people called to him, and he hearkened to their voice, and they keep going, and blah, 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 blah. So there you have Yashav, he sat down. Eitzel ha'hekal, near the temple. Wa'yik ra'u, so there the sequence is continued. The sequence that began with the Yashav, he sat down, is continued now with the wa'yik ra'u, with the wow pathak plus doubling, and then the imperfect of the verb. Wa'yikru Eli, and they called to him, Ha'am is the subject, so the people called to him. Wa'yishma el kolam, and he hearkened, he heard, el kolam, to their voice. And the sequence could go on. So here, very frequently in biblical Hebrew narrative, you have a perfect verb in the past, describing past events. You have a perfect verb, and then the sequences continue with an imperfect verb with a special form of wow. Imperfect verb, special form of wow, just keeps blah, 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 blah going. The clauses keep going like that for a long time. So this is at the top of the next page. The form of the conjunction is illustrated by, and he gives you a bunch of instances here. So you have, in each of these, you have wow, pathak plus doubling to the next consonant. Sole exception, notice the wa ektov. Why don't you have wow, pathak plus doubling if you have an imperfect there that begins with an aleph, like ektov?
Because you can't put a dagesh in the aleph, the
Good.
guttural.
Can't stick a dagesh in aleph, so the dagesh bounces out, goes to the bottom. Or more technically, the pathak is lengthened to commas. So that is still that special form of wow, just lengthened to commas there. So then in terms of the meaning of the sequence again, he says all past tense narrative in which each verb is temporally or logically consequent upon the preceding verb employs this sequence. The imperfects so used take on the tense value of the perfect and are said to be converted. So that's why in those, on the previous page, those imperfect verbs were translated as if they were perfect. So when you have this wow pathak plus doubling in this sequence, the tense value of the imperfect verb is the same as if it was a perfect. So you translate it just like it was a perfect. That's why it's he sat down near the temple and the people called to him and he hearkened, all past tense, because it's continuing this sequence that began with a perfect, so they have the tense value of the perfect. Then back on page 108 there, he's continuing. He says the, quote, perfect value of the form wow pathak plus imperfect became so commonplace that it may be employed even without a perfect to begin the sequence. In other words, anytime you see this wow pathak plus doubling, it always has this flipped, the imperfect gets flipped in its value. So there he has, and it's there the sentence there. He says, and the man wrote the words. Wayiktov, the imperfect of write. Wayiktov ha'ish eth hadavarim. And the man wrote the words instead of the man will write the words. The conjunction used in the narrative sequences is called the wow conversive or the wow consecutive after its function. So that wow, that special form of wow, this is the wow conversive because it flips the sense of the imperfect verb that's attached to it. Well, this is just the normal wow, just and. This and flips perfects to imperfects in terms of meaning. Then he says, because this next paragraph is kind of, he basically says, use dynamic equivalents instead of translating and each time. We should actually be better to be more literal and not as dynamic as he says there. That may sound very complicated, but basically all that he's saying is if you have this on an imperfect verb, you translate the imperfect like a verb like a perfect. That's all that he's saying. It's really not very complicated. And then he's saying that this is very often how Hebrew narrative is written. You just have a sequence begins with a perfect verb, and you just have blah, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And it just keeps going. And as long as it's going in that sequence, you often have this wow pathak plus doubling, just continuing the sequence as the narrative goes on. And that's why, if you think about it, like in the Bible, even in English, you notice how there's a lot of sentence, you have a lot more like, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, than you just in normal English. That's because it's a narrative sequence. Do you have any questions about that at this point?
When he says that it became so commonplace, it became employed even without the perfect in the beginning of the sequence, is there any validity that
Yep.
I mean, or is it
There
just
is.
like it's always been like, because he acts like it became that
well,
way
I mean,
eventually, like the
yeah, it's not like a later books of the Bible versus an earlier books of the Bible thing. It's something you see in the Bible all over the place. So, like, you could have a book of the Bible itself begin with a wow plus a wow conversive.
So it's
That's
just
the first word of the book.
It's always been that way. It's never became.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's some earlier stage of Hebrew than there was in the Bible, I guess. But at least in biblical Hebrew, you do see this. This is something you see in biblical Hebrew, and I think Adam spoke Hebrew, and Noah did as well. But but in any case, and maybe they spoke a little bit earlier form. I don't know. But you do see this all over the Bible. This wow conversive everywhere. And actually, books that begin with a wow conversive, often it kind of ties it to the previous book. And that actually even shows like a New Testament reference to like a few books that are connected in that way would actually show kind of, it kind of ties them together. I can't remember off the top of my head which ones are like that, but it can even tie it in the previous book. Like I think, I should check before I say this, but I think like Joshua does it and it ties into the Pentateuch, but I don't want to be wrong on that. So anyway, wow conversive flips the sense. Okay. Now, imperfect plus perfect sequence. This is where a narrative sequence, the one we just saw, you had a perfect verb followed by imperfect, imperfect, imperfect with a wow, this special form, the wow conversive. Boom. Now we have, let's say you had a sequence that began with an imperfect verb followed by wow on a perfect, wow on a perfect, wow on a perfect, wow on a perfect, wow on a perfect. That would be this other narrative sequence. And that, in that case, that would have all the meanings of the imperfect, whether future or habitual durative. And now, when you have that sequence, it doesn't get the special form of the wow. It just gets the normal form of the wow, but it still flips it. So in other words, if you have this form of wow on an imperfect verb, it has a tense value of the perfect. If you have this form of the wow on a perfect verb, it flips the sense of the perfect to mean like as if it was an imperfect. Okay? Which is one reason why in the answer key, Lambda hasn't been doing that, because if you and you might have in your English to Hebrew done it because you didn't know this yet, but in the answer key he hasn't been like sticking a wow on a perfect verb. He's put it on the subject or something, because if it was on the verb it would flip it. So here it says the conjunction is normal and pointed according to the regular rules given in paragraph 46. So examples. Yimtza otho wenathan lo eth ha-kesef. Yimtza, he will find, imperfect, otho, him. Wenathan. Now, nathan on its own would normally be he gave, but here it's he will give, because the wow flips it. And so you translate it like an imperfect, even though it's a perfect, because of the wow. And he will give to him the silver, the money. Yisrafu eth ha'ir Wilakadu eth ha'am. Yisrafu, they will burn the city, eth ha'ir. Wilakadu, there you have a perfect, but it's translated like imperfect because of the wow on it. And take captive, eth ha'am, the people. And there, both those initial imperfects have a future sense, so the perfects that continue the sequence also have a future sense. If the first imperfect were used in a habitual sense, that would also be carried through the sequence. So there you have like Yikra el Hanavi wa Amer. So if Yikra, based on the context, was a kind of habitual thing, he habitually called to the prophet, then the wa Amer would also be and he habitually said. So the imperfect that begins it will determine whether the following perfects with a wow are continuing to have the idea of the future or habitual. And again here, this kind of sequence can continue for a while as well. Whenever you have things described in the future, he will do this, and then this will happen, this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen. That also you can have these sequences just continuing for a while. Now, if, he says, note that when a negative clause is inserted in the sequence, the verb is no longer first. The verb of the negative clause, then it's in its normal non-converted form. So these sequences can only go on if the verb begins each clause, because the and has to be on the verb. If the and is not on the verb, everything's normal, just like we learned before this lesson. This must be stuck directly on the verb for this flipping to happen. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. So, like this sentence he gives there, they went and called to him, but he did not hear. Halaku, they went or walked. Wa yikra'u, there you have kara, called, in the imperfect, but it's translated like a perfect because it has the wow conversive on it. So they went and they called to him, Eli. Well, lo shama. Notice the wow now is not on the verb. It's before lo. And so shama is heard. It just has the normal perfect tense value of to hear because there's no wow on it. So there, halaku is normal because it's just, it has no wow on it. Wa yikra'u has its sense flipped from an imperfect to a perfect type sense because it has a wow conversive on it. But then the next wow is just not on a verb, and so then the shama is just normal again. Then he says, after such an interruption, the original sequence may be resumed by reverting to the converted forms. So maybe after that, like what he's saying there is then you could go back again and have another wow conversive on another verb, and you could just go back to the sequence after this little break. And sometimes the breaks can be significant in terms of exegetically significant or syntactically significant. Like you have a sequence, boom, 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 and it's broken for some reason. Sometimes that might maybe something you particularly pay attention to. There's a reason why, or maybe it's parenthetical information or whatever, and then it goes back to the sequence again. So that actually, sometimes like when people block diagram, that if you have a sequence, that kind of gets moved out of the sequence, and that can teach you something of significance. So, then he just says, that's the main point of all this. Then he just says, this is just a pronunciation thing at the bottom here, so less important. Important, but less important. It says in the converted perfect, so the perfect with the imperfect sense to it, the stress is usually shifted to the final syllable in the first person singular, second person masculine singular. So instead of kothav, here you have wa kothav t with the accent on the final syllable, the ultima. The ultima is the name for the final syllable. Penultima is the one before that. So kothav t, and I shall write, wa kothav ta, and you shall write. Thou shalt write. It says the pointing, the vowels, are unaffected by the shift in stress, which does not take place in all instances, especially the corresponding forms of verb third aleph, third hey. So that's just a pronunciation thing. The stress moves to the final syllable. Questions about the meaning of this, how this narrative sequence thing works? No? Okay, good. That's, knowing that, once you know now, that actually is very important for, again, like I said, because this is all over the Bible. So until you know that, you really can't do sequences of sentences. Now you actually could do it. So that's good. I mean, there's still obviously, a little bit over half the book, but you can actually get going on sentences now. So that's very important. Segulate nouns. It's not that hard. You just have to remember these stuck right on the beginning of verbs. Flip them. Segulates. Nouns with penultimate stress, like melech, are collectively called segulates. We've seen these before, though he hasn't called them segulate nouns before. He's just telling you that now. But that we've seen a few of these before. And those have the presence of the vowel segol in one or both syllables, which you can see why they'd be called segulates if they have a segol. These nouns revert to an original one-syllable stem in the singular when a suffix is added. So melech is king, malchi, my king. The vowel of the suffixal form, in this instance pathak, is the characteristic vowel of the word, and also occurs in the construct plural. The four main types of segulate nouns are represented by, it gives you melech, kever, sefer, and kodesh. So all of those nouns have a segol in the absolute form. You can see that. Some of them have two segols. Melech and kever, grave and king, have two segols. Sefer and kodesh, book and holiness, have one segol. But they both are these three consonant nouns with a segol underneath the second consonant, some with two segols. But there are four different types. Melech and kever look exactly the same here. In the construct, they're both exactly the same. But notice in the with suffixes, melech gets a pathak underneath the first root consonant, while kever gets a hirek. So malchi is my king, malkacha, thy king. Then he skips a few forms and goes to malkachem, your king, with the heavy suffix. So he puts that in because chem is the heavy suffix versus a light suffix. And then with kivri, my grave, kivracha, thy grave, and you could go down, kivro, his grave, and so on. Kivrakem, again, your grave, and there you have the hireks. In the plural absolute, the normal plural is just the normal plural form. Melakim, there again, you don't see any difference between melech and kever. But then with the construct form, kings of, graves of, you have malke, with the pathak showing up again. Kivri, graves, the hirek shows up again. And then in the plural, with the suffix malake and so on, you have malkehem and kivrekem. So there you have those hireks. On Sefer, all the ones that are two segols, you don't know. You just have to learn with the suffixes whether it's going to be a pathak or a hirek. You don't know with looking at the absolute form. Just you have to learn it for each noun. The ones that are like Sefer, the segol nouns like Sefer, always have hirek. So any segol noun like Sefer will always have the hirek in the suffix forms. And then the ones like Kodesh, with a cholam and then a segol, will always have kametz hatuf. Kadshi, that's a kametz hatuf there, not a kametz. Kadshi, kadshaka. Of course, you can tell because it's a short syllable. So he explains that right underneath there. He says nouns with tsere, under the first root consonant, have the characteristic hirek. Those in cholam have kametz hatuf, but those with segol may have either pathak or hirek, which must be learned with each noun. Of the nouns of this type which have occurred thus far, all have a characteristic pathak. And then he gives you all the seglet nouns you've learned so far. So you've learned a bunch of them. Eretz, earth, derek, way. And he goes on, chesed, kesef, yeled, kerem, melech, eved, even, selim. Except kever and sedek, which have hirek. Kivri, tzidki. So we've had a bunch of these seglet nouns already, and they all have that pathak that shows up with the suffixes, except those two which have hirek. Was that kind of crazy?
Not really.
Not too bad? Okay, good. That's good. So, some of this kind of stuff is stuff that maybe a less thorough grammar would just say, like, figure it out or not really explain it to you. But really, in the longer term, it's better to know that there are these four types, and this is what they do because, those are pretty common. If you look at those seglet nouns, those are common. Eretz, earth, derek, way, vineyard, kerem, king, melech. These are all nouns that come up a lot. So knowing why they do what they do is going to be valuable for you. Kodesh, holiness, is that a lot in the Bible? Yeah, a lot of times. Okay, remarks on some prepositions. The noun panim, face, found only in the plural with singular meaning. So it doesn't mean that the person's two-faced, just his face. Okay. Forms a part of several important prepositions. Lifnei is in the presence of before, because you can imagine you're to the face of. So if you're to the face of somebody, you're before him. Mipnei, from the face of, is from the presence of, from before. Milifnei, again he says same sort of meaning. Alpnei, he says on the surface of, up against. You can often render those, you can often retain face in the translation value of some of these, like alpnei, you can say upon the face of the ground instead of on the surface of the ground. So you can often retain the sense of face, but lifnei, the King James will translate it like presence of too. So it's not like, you can't say presence of, you have to say to the face of or something. It's fine to say in the presence of, but you can see how face plus the preposition kind of gives you this sort of sense. Now, since panei is the noun, face, you can't add suffixes to the noun. And they would act the way that banim would with suffixes. And so you could have, on the next page, le panei, that's lifnei, lamed plus the noun face with the suffix mi, the plural suffix, because panim is plural. So before mi, you could have lefanecha, before the, and so on. You can see from all this suffix stuff that it is important to have memorized what those singular and plural suffixes are that were learned in Lesson 20. Susi, susaka, susake, suso, susa, susenu, suskem, suskem, susam, susan. And then the plural ones, susei, suseka, susayak, susai, suseha. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Do you remember what I'm talking about, those suffixes?
Yes.
Yeah. So obviously those are important because they're coming up all the time and they'll continue to come up. So then he says, many prepositions, like the preceding, are compounded from a simple preposition plus a noun. Suffixes are attached according to the normal rules. So al-davar can mean, it's just upon and then the word or thing. So upon the thing comes out like as because of in the meaning. Batok is baith plus tok in the midst of. Also bakaram in the midst of. And he gives you some examples of suffixes there. Bethoko, in the midst of him or in the midst of it, probably. But in the midst of something that is a masculine, mentioned earlier. Bekirbo, in the midst of whatever was mentioned before that's masculine. Because even the simple prepositions may be compounded with one another for greater clarity. Most of these are self-explanatory. May al is from and then al upon. So from upon or from on. May eighth, eighth can be with, of course, as well as being the direct object marker. From with, from at. Mitachath, from under, kind of makes sense. Any questions about any of that stuff there?
Nope.
Okay, great. So he gives you some nouns here. Kerev, inward part or midst. But Kerev, God, when Jehovah dwells in the midst of his people, you would have Kerev there. Chesed. King James translated mercy. His mercy endureth forever. This is the one, mercy, loving kindness. It's frequently used for God's covenantal grace to his people. So his chesed endures forever is the word there. With suffixes, you have chasti, my grace, my mercy. Midbar is a wilderness or a desert. It's where you put your cattle out to graze. So there could be people there, but it's not a large urban center. So you might refer to parts of Mukwonago as Midbar. It's certainly not an urban center, large urban center. Panim is face, but it's only in the plural. Mar'eh is an appearance. So hopefully your panim has a nice mar'eh. Mitzrei is an Egyptian, adjective or noun. Mikneh, cattle or property. Chamor is a donkey or a male donkey there. Athon is a female donkey. Magefa is a stroke, a plague, or affliction. So God smites the people with a plague. You'd have Magefa. Then you have Negev. Does your Negev have a dagesh in the noon?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be a typo. It's not like there's this inherent dagesh in the noon. I think it just has it there for some reason. I think it probably was copied from the next little phrase there, ha-negva, where the HEB500 plus doubling the article gives the dagesh there. But Negev is just Negev, a southern part of Palestine, the area there. And then ha-negva is towards the Negev. You're going towards the south of Palestine. Achoth is a sister. Kohen, a priest. You ever known anybody with the last name of Kohen? Yes. Yeah, so that's his name means priest. So he might have come from a priestly family, maybe. Nagaf is to strike, plague, or afflict. Notice it's like that one we just had here. Magefa. Notice there it's the same trilateral root, Magefa. If you look in BDAG, BDAG, not BDAG, that's the Greek New Testament lexicon. You look under BDB, Magefa would be underneath Nun gimel pay, just like nagaf, to strike, plague, afflict. Lama'an is so that, in order that, plus the imperfect. So in order that, whatever might happen there. Ba'avur, for the sake of, because of. Al devour, for the sake of, because of also. Okay, that's lesson 24. Have anything you want to say about lesson 24? All right. Let's take a break before we do lesson 25, and then we'll do some homework in the back on. Okay. Okay, lesson 25, the imperative. So this one is definitely, it's imperative. Anyway, the basic stem of the imperative is always closely related to that of the imperfect and can be deduced from it. So yiktov, you just drop the yik, you drop the yih, and you have kathov. Yishkav, you drop the yih, and you have shakav. Yishmeh, you drop the yih, and you have shema. Yivcher, bachar, yikra, kara. So it's not too bad. The endings of the imperative are the same as those on the second person forms of the imperfect. So the masculine, like, doesn't have an ending, the suffix. The feminine has an e suffix, the masculine plural u, and the feminine plural na. But when you add the e and the u suffixes, then the stem changes a little bit. So there you have the kathov would be the masculine singular imperative right. Kithvi would be the feminine singular right to a lady. Kithvu would be the masculine plural, you, guys, right. Kathovna, feminine plural for writing. And you can have those, you can see shikav, shikvi, shikvu, shikvana, and so on. I believe that Williamson has something useful to say about this too. Okay. Yeah, look on page 90. He says, as a rather crude but simple rule of thumb, it may be observed that the imperative kal, the simple form of the verb studied so far, in other words, you don't know the PL and the hofal and the hifil and so on, may nearly always be formed by deleting the first letter of the relevant part of the imperfect and making any necessary adjustment to the pointing, the vocalization, demanded by the usual rules of vocalization. Thus, tick boats, you drop the ti, and now the shawa, no longer on the kof, is no longer ending a syllable like on tick boats, and so now it's an audible shawa, kavots, and therefore you omit the dagash lene from the baith. And so instead of tick boats, now you have kavots. Tick tov, kathov, same thing, except now you have a dagash lene in the kof. Ta'avoth, avoth, no yismach, samach. Now here a little bit, this one explains some of the changes that Lamb just gave you here. Tick tavu, you drop the ti, and then you would have ka-tavu, but you can't have two shawas in a row like that. And so because of the rule of shawa, it goes to kithvu. Do you remember the rule of shawa? Yeah, and so then what happens? Yeah, you can't have two shawas together, so then what happens?
You can't have two shawas together, so one becomes the hirek.
Yeah, and it becomes like a single syllable. Like so. That's why katavu goes to kithvu. And then likewise the tik tovna, kathovna, kathovna. They're actually, oh, yeah. Okay. There, it's just the Dagesh changes. That isn't a rule of Shawwal one. Okay, good. So that rule of Shawwal thing on the bottom of 113, Landon just says, but when Hirakin, you add the E and the U at the end, you get these. He doesn't say, he says the stem is altered as follows. As follows is basically what Williamson just said in the answer key on the bottom there. So that's why it's kathov, kithvi, kithvu, kathovna, and so on. The only one that is a little bit interesting is the ones with the exclamation point with the second guttural. Bachar becomes bachari, bacharu, bacharna. So, and then the last one where the kara, the third aleph, it's kara, kiri, kiru, kurena. What he's giving you, the reason he has those 5 ones with the imperative down there, the kathav, the first one is just the sound trilateral root. Okay. Shakav is a pathak imperfect. Shama is a third guttural. Bachar is second guttural. And then kara is third aleph. That's why he gives you 5 there. Each one is one of the types that you've learned or we've talked about and you will learn soon in the next, from the last 2 lessons. Have any questions about that so far?
Why does he have the exclamation marks on 3 of the transliterations?
Because those 3, you might not expect necessarily at this point that it would be those forms. Like the other one, the kathov, kithvi, kithvu, kathovna, it's just like, what he just said if you just drop the first consonant. But like on the last one, like karena, you have a segol that showed up on that last form on kara, kiri, kiru, karena. So you might expect that to just still be a comments. So the exclamation point is if it's a little bit different than what you might have expected by just dropping the first letter of the imperfect.
Okay. And then the other 2.
It's not that he's just like excited about that form.
And then the other 2 because it's a shoah reduced with a pathak.
Yeah, you have that pathak and hatef pathak situation. That's what he's pointing out.
Okay.
Okay, in top of 114, he says the suffix kametz he occurs frequently in the masculine singular imperative with no striking modification of the meaning. The stem usually appears with kametz hatuf before the suffix. Kathva, right, instead of kathov. So just be aware of that. I don't think he does that too much in the exercise as far as I can recall, but maybe he does. I don't remember now. But that does show up once in a while, so just be aware of it. And then something else it just says something to be aware of is that the pathak imperfects can have hirex, like shikva, shilcha, instead of being like shakav on the previous page. So remember the second one on 113, that was the pathak imperfect. Shikav, shikvi, shikvu, shikavna. It says they often have hirek. So actually that is what he actually gives you there. Let's see. Oh, he's talking about if this thing is if you have that kametz he on it. He's only talking that last sentence there if you have the kametz he thing stuck on the imperative with no difference in the meaning. Okay. So that whole thing is just sometimes, once in a while, a masculine singular imperative has a kametz he on it, and then it changes the vowels like that. That's all that is. So it's not bad to be aware of that, but that's not the key thing in the lesson by any means. How do you negate the imperative? Tell somebody not to write, not to go, or whatever. Well, al plus the imperfect is for immediate specific commands. Don't go, Don't stick your finger in the electrical outlet. Don't chop his head off. Don't eat the priestly food, whatever. Lo plus the imperfect is durative, non-specific commands. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. And so that's exegetically significant there. Whether you have an al plus an imperfect or a lo plus an imperfect, both is a negation, but it's a different kind of negation. So being aware of that, even that's one thing right there where, Strong's Concordance isn't going to tell you that. That's a syntactical feature of the Hebrew language. That's a blessing to be aware of. And the Ten Commandments are lo plus imperfects, which makes sense. The particle, when it's the thou shalt nots, of course, honor thy father and mother is a negation there, or you have a few positive ones. The particle na may follow an imperative form, which means please, I pray. So shalak na, send, I pray thee. Shemina, hear, I pray. Kara na. It's frequently joined with a makef, and when it has the makef, the two are considered as one word, and so then the stress is shifted from the verb to the particle na, and so then you have certain reductions. So from shemor na, the cholam becomes a shorter vowel. It becomes shamar na, from shemor na. And na may also be added to the al of the negative imperative. So al na tishlak. Do not send, I pray. The King James usually translates it as something like, I pray thee is oftentimes the na with an imperative. Like Moses, send, I pray thee by the hand of him whom thou wilt send, Exodus 4. I think that's like an imperative with a na, if I remember correctly. But the King James translated as something. He says you should most often ignore it. God did put the word in there, so it's good to render it as something, I would say.
I was getting confused about that word in the interlinear, J.P. Green, because he is like, sometimes it's please, sometimes it's like now, and I was like, what is that word? I was just like this week, I was looking at that
really?
because it showed up a lot.
So there you go. So na is this like particle that's often associated with the imperative that's like, it can be a politeness thing, or you can see that's the difference between actually learning a language and just looking at interlinear. You don't, there's some things not that interlinear doesn't have any value, it's great, but it's not the same.
Helps me practice reading.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, that can help you practice reading too. Okay, first guttural verbs. So here we've looked at second guttural, third guttural, now we have first guttural. Imperfect and imperative. There are two types. I would suggest adding to your essential group of kathav to know, add that imperative of kathav on the 113 at the bare minimum. Really, you should know, all of them.
To memorize?
Yeah, but as a bare minimum, you really need to know at least the imperative of you need to know the sound trilateral roots of everything for sure. I mean, there's other things you need to know too, but you really need to know that. So just like you really need to know the perfect and imperfect of kathav, you really need to know the imperative forms too, because those are the ones that all the other forms differ from. And so we have to have that stone cold, so then you can recognize differences in the other ones, instead of just each one being a new, unrelated whatever that's coming to overwhelm you like a flood. Okay, first gutturals here. Two basic types of imperfect. You have ones like avad, with a perfect like ya'avoth, an imperative of avoth, to serve, related to eved, servant or slave. Then you have chazak, with segols, yechazak, and an imperative, chazak. The cholim imperfects, like yiktov, tiktov, tiktavi, have a pathak in the prefixal element, except the first person singular. So in other words, the cholim imperfects are like avad. The pathak imperfects are like Shema, or that's a third guttural. The Pathak imperfects are like, well, that would still be that type, are like with a segol, like Chazak. Okay. So each of those main types has developed a secondary vowel under the guttural root consonant. In inflection, the rule of shwa must apply. Thus, ya, am, do. The hatef pathak there is essentially the same as shwa, so you can't have that because it's like shwa underneath the ayin, shwa underneath the mem. That becomes ya, am, do, with the hatef pathak changing to full pathak. And similarly elsewhere. And he says, note their retention of the daleth without the dagash lene. So in that form, ya, am, thu, now am is a closed syllable, so you'd expect the daleth there to have a dagash lene in it. But it doesn't, because this just kind of flipped over from being ya, am, thu, and then by the rule of shwa, so that just got retained. He just says, note that. Don't worry about it a whole lot. Like, if you forget that happens, it's not going to hinder your ability to translate the Bible. But he just is telling you, because you otherwise might say, why? If you are an amazing, Hebrew person and you are perfect in Hebrew at this point, you might look at that and say, what? What's going on there? So that's why he says retain that. So, okay, and so here he gives you the forms here of avad and chazak, first gutturals. And really, the first guttural is different enough, you might want to just consider memorizing it. Memorize it or just remember what the differences are or something. It's really not too bad. Let's go ahead and say amad. This is like the cholam imperfect. We'll say the amad ones and then the chazak ones.
At the bottom of 114?
Yes.
Okay.
Ya'amoth, ta'amoth, ta'amoth, ta'amthi, e'amoth, ya'amthu, ta'amothna, ta'amthu, ta'amothna, na'amoth, yechazak, techazak, techazak, techazki, echazak, yechazku, techazakna, techazku, techazakna, nechazak. And then he gives you the imperatives at the top. So serve. We'll say those together. We'll say those across. Avoth, ivthi, ivthu, avothna, chazak, chizki, chizku, chazakna. So, that's exciting there. You have several verbs where no secondary vowel is present. The inflection, except for the vowel, the preformative, the thing you stick on the front, follows the regular pattern of yik tov, or that's the cholam imperfect, or yik bad, the pathak imperfect. For example, yak shov, yak shavu, tech dar. So there, in other words, notice there on yak shov, it doesn't, basically he's saying that those ones act just like they would if they weren't first guttural, and they don't do the first guttural thing that is just at the bottom of 114. Instead, they do the sound trilateral root thing. That's the only thing he's saying with that. And that's why you have the shwa underneath the guttural letter, which you wouldn't really be expected.
Yeah, I was looking at that. It looked odd.
Good. If it looked odd, that is good. That means you've learned something. By lesson 25. So, chata The verb to sin is both first guttural and third aleph. So it combines the features of the first gutturals with those segols, and also the third aleph with the lengthening of the pathak to a comments at the end. So let's say that one. Yecheta, techeta, techeta, techeti, echeta, yechetu, techetetna, techetu, techetetna, necheta. So there you can see, you really, I don't know, I would probably memorize at least like that, the ones with a segol for the first guttural. You might want to just memorize the whole paradigm on your way to memorizing every single thing the book says about everything. But whatever it takes, you do want to learn it, because first gutturals are pretty common. And it'll save you misery later when you actually have to figure out what the forms are to know this. Notice, like here, you can see how the grammar builds on itself. Like here, if when he says it combines the feature of each type, here on page 115. Now, we just learned the third aleph today, so if you're shaky on that, it's understandable. But he's assuming that you have caught what's different about the first gutturals and about the third aleph when he says it combines the features of both. So then we have segolets. A little bit more about them, like in the last lesson. The main types of segolets are slightly modified. Remember what the segolets are?
With
an hour ago?
The segolets, when you got two of them.
It's the one where there's a set. It's like those three-letter nouns where the second root consonant always has a segol, and sometimes the first one does too. And remember, there's four types. There's the ones with a path that like the melech, like the kever, like the sefer, and like the kodesh. The cholam, it was just like on that page. And since we just talked about an hour ago and have done exercises with it, it's understandable if you aren't, perfect on this point. In fact, if you were perfect on this point, you'd be pretty amazing. The main types of segolets are slightly modified when gutturals occur in the root. Shock and awe. Guttural in the first position. Only the type sefer is affected. The characteristic vowel is segol instead of herex. So sefer, remember, where the suffixes ended up getting these herex in it. Now instead of getting herex, it gets segols because of the first guttural. So those columns, Aether, Edri, Edrecha, Edrekem, Adarim, Edre, and Adare. He doesn't tell you what those columns mean, but they're the same columns as on 109. So the first one is the absolute form. The second one's the construct. The third one is with some suffixes. The first masculine, the first person singular suffix, second person singular, and the second person masculine plural. Then you have the plural absolute, adarim, the plural construct, edre, and the plural with a first person plural suffix, adare. And the same thing for all the other ones. So it's the same columns as on page 109. Guttural and second root position, you have some things change. You have a lot more pathaks here than you did before. So notice here, na'ar is a segolet noun, but because it's second guttural, there are no segols. And to'ar is a second guttural too, but because of the guttural, there are no segols in the segolet noun. So that's kind of exciting.
Wait, these are segolets with pathaks?
Yeah, yep. There's segolet nouns without any segols because of the guttural. So they still do the same stuff as the segolets on 109, on page 109, but the thing is there's just no segols. So like to'ar is the same type of segolet as kodesh on page 109. And you can think of na'ar kind of like melech, I think, that type, the first one, with a pathax. But there are no segals because it's guttural. So, but na'ar does the same sort of thing as melech on page 109, and to'er does the same thing as kodesh, just with pathax and no segals. Say, well, that's kind of crazy. Young man is a common word, though. I mean, it's better to know than see it and not know what it's doing when you actually have to read the Bible. So, then it says, notice especially the forms before the heavy suffixes, that's the chems, and also before ka. So, guttural in the third root position, at least you have segals here again. Here again, you have these pathax instead of segol underneath the second root consonant. So zera and zevak are segulant nouns, and you can think of them. Well, look at the construct forms of zera and the construct forms of zevak, and tell me which ones are those like on page 109. Are they like A, B, C, or D? This will show whether you were getting this or not.
Zere.
Zera. Seed.
Zera.
Yeah, zere is the my seed.
Okay, Zera is like Melech.
Good. So that first one, zera, is like type A, is like melech. And you can tell that because the pathak is showing up in the suffixed forms, in the construct form, and so on. Good. Tov. How about zevach? Which type is that like? A, B, C, or D?
That would be like B.
Good. That's like kever because these hierarchs show up in the construct forms, in the construct form with singular suffixes. How about under B, the na'ar? Is na'ar like A, B, C, or D with a second guttural in the second root position? And again, the key is to look at the ones with the suffixes and the construct form.
Melech.
Good. Na'ar is like melech because of the pathax with the suffixes. How about to'ar? Which one is that like?
Well, oh, okay, there. D.
Good. To'ar is like D, like kodesh, and that's why there's the kametz hatufs. So these still are segulant nouns, and they are still doing their segulant noun thing, but it's just the gutturals change the vowel associated with the guttural letter, which still is kind of hairy, but it's doable. Oh, and there's one more at the top of the next page too, orak. Orak, what is that like, A, B, C, or D?
That would be like D too.
That'd be like D, good. Orak is like D, good. Wait. Tov ma'od. So that lesson was a little bit more crazy than some of the other ones. A little more work, but you can do it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Vocab here, sarah, distress or trouble. And the first vowel does not get reduced in the construct, so it still has sarath instead of getting reduced to a shawah. Gavereth is the mistress or lady, so the lady of the house would be the Gavereth. A there is a flock or a herd. Zerah, seed, offspring, descendants. can be used in a collective way, like the Abrahamic covenant promises to Abraham and to his seed. Ultimately, it's Christ, but it's also can be a group now, and so the descendants are definitely in there. Yareh is to be afraid, and you're afraid from somebody, or mipene, afraid from the face of, or with a simple object. Barak is to flee. So you can think about our foreign policy and our president, and you can remember Barak. And that will help you to remember that word maybe. Though I think his name actually is like from blessed, like Barak, not with a cheth, but you can still think of like fleeing from everywhere and letting the terrorists come back in. Barak. So, Shav. So this is going to date the video. See, somebody who watches it later will say, I know who the president was then. Okay. So Shav is to return, to go, or come back. The trilateral root there would have would be sheen, wow, baith. So it might be worth learning the verb with a wow already. But he just gives you, and I think even in the back of the book in the lexicon here, he has it that way. But hara is to conceive or become pregnant. And of course, that would be for ladies doing that. A mizeh, from what place, from where? Can also be adjectively. A mizeh, ear, from what city? Pen is lest so that not, lest they forget my grace to them. Kayom, like the day, today, this day. And then na, he says it's this particle, and he doesn't give you a translation. This would be the please, I pray thee particle. And he says, see paragraphs 102 and 136. Of course, we haven't got to 136 yet, so you don't necessarily have to know what a cohortative or adjussive is, so we haven't talked about that. That is later, but those also have na. Cohortatives and adjussives are the first person indirect imperative, third person indirect imperative, but don't worry about that yet. Okay, that is lesson 25. Actually, he talks about that the very next, the adjussives and cohortatives, he talks about them already next page 118, but I think that 23 through 25 is enough to chew for one little segment here. Any questions about this lesson at this point?
I don't think so.
No? Yeah. But this one is more challenging than 21 and 22. But it's all right. Okay. I want to be able to try some homework, but let's go ahead and do the verses from the Bible, just so we have something exciting and fun here. Not that grammar isn't fun. This is God's will, so you can just learn it. But I would have to say that just learning grammar for no particular reason isn't necessarily the most exciting thing to me. But translating the Bible is very exciting. So, okay. So we have the ones from lesson 21 and 22, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so why don't you read that sentence in Hebrew, and then you can give me your translation of it. Actually, wait a second. Let me get to the right page here. It's 18 to 20. There we go. Okay. What book is this, by the way?
Eov.
Yov, which is?
Job.
Job, yes. Good. All right.
Ish haya ba'aretz.
Ba'aretz.
Ba'aretz. Uts. Eov. Shamo. Wa haya. Haish. Hahu. Tam. Wa yashar. Wire. Elohim Wasar Meira.
All right. Tov ma'od. What does that mean?
I have a man was in the land Uz, his name Job, and that man was complete and just, and feared God, and turned from evil.
Say the second part. I was trying to look at every word. Could you read the second part of the translation again from the Wachaya Ha'ish?
Wahaya Ha'ish. Okay. Wait, I'm reading my English.
Yeah, read your English translation. Just read
Okay.
a little slower.
Wahaya and was Ha'ish the man.
Oh no, you can just read your translation. I just
Okay.
just read a little slower.
And that man was complete and just, and feared God, and turned from evil.
Good. Tov ma'od. Notice. Okay, good. I'll point out a few things there in a second. What's the subject of Haya at the beginning of the verse there?
A man.
Yeah, so Ish, so there's a man in the land of Uz. Eretz is also construct with Uz.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the land of Uz because
Okay.
it's a construct form. But Eretz Uz. Uz.
Mike, I had a question of why was the word that who? Why is it a pathak and not kometz under the first hey?
On Hahu,
Yeah.
I think
I didn't understand that.
versus Hahu, you're saying?
Yeah.
It's so what page are the rules for that?
I don't remember. I'll look. It's in like one of the first lessons. Okay, I'm on page 8 with definite articles.
Okay.
It's continued, so maybe there's something before this.
It is continued. So before hey and chayth, what is the article normally? HC.
It's normally hey, but you can't. I was thinking you can't double it, so it's supposed to be kometz.
Yes, this is like a virtual doubling instead of an actual lengthening. So notice in 8b, or not 8, page 8, paragraph 18, it says before ayin, the article is normally hey comets, except sometimes it's hey segol. Before hey and chayth, the article is normally hey pathak with no doubling. But if the hey is followed by unextended comets or chayth, then it's hey segol. So actually here, that it is the normal, what you expect here for hey and chayth. So it's just a virtual doubling instead of a compensatory lengthening.
Okay.
So good that we got to review that. It's good it's good that if you see something like that, you don't just say, oh, I don't know, and just go on. You do actually want to see the reason. So that is good. So ha'ish, hahu, that man was. And I gave you a little note on wahaya there at the bottom there. So that was his character. What's the parsing of Tom?
Of what?
Wahaya ha'ish hahu Tom.
Hahu Tom. was the parsing of it,
Yeah.
it would be call perfect. I don't know.
It's just an adjective, actually.
Okay.
Did you look it up, or did you just like?
I did look it up, and I wasn't sure about that word, so I actually wrote the page number that I got it from.
Oh, what page was it on?
1070.
Okay, good. You know, I forgot to bring my lexicon.
But you didn't question
Do you have your lexicon with you right now?
Yes.
So, let me, I think there's one back here. But right now, I'll just take a look at yours here for a second. Okay, there's Tom on page 1070. And good, so here, so there's the verb, here's the noun tome, and here's the adjective Tom. And it's actually that word right there.
Okay.
So Tom.
So that's why I was questioning it, because I was looking at this word here.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's the verb.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the verb. It's actually this adjective here, tome. And I think, let's see if he actually even mentions Job in the lexicon. Yeah, look, there. 3, under definition 3, complete, morally innocent, having integrity, Ish Tom, Job 1:8-2-3. Sometimes in a detailed lexicon like this, not that the guy's infallible, but what definition he puts it under can often be kind of useful, and often it's a reasonable place to put the word. Mm-hmm. I'm going to actually put this, let's see, just so you can see, camera people. Is it possible to focus on the book at all?
I'll just hold it right there.
Okay, so I just pointed out to him here, here's the verb tam, page 1070, and it's not that verb, it's not the noun, tome, but it's the adjective down here, tom, complete, and then the definition continues at the top of the next page, 1071, and we found under definition 3, complete, morally innocent, having integrity. It even lists Ish Tom, Job 1:8-2-3. So it was right there in the lexicon underneath definition 3. Okay, Tov Ma'od. And complete or perfect doesn't, it can be sinless. Now, Job wasn't sinless. He was declared righteous. He was judicially just before God. So he was perfect in that sense, literally. But perfect can also be like perfect in all your parts. Like the priests needed to be perfect in the sense they couldn't be missing an ear or something. So all your part, it doesn't have to be, so he was a well-rounded, upright person. And he was perfect in that sense. He wasn't, Pelagius would say that he was perfect and that he was, completely sinless. But in the book of Job himself, he actually, confesses sin and so on. So it would be difficult to affirm that in light of the whole book. Okay, great. So that's Tom there, and then Wayashar and upright. What is Wayire? What is Wire?
And to fear.
What's the parsing?
Oh.
It's from yara, to fear. Good.
It would be called perfect. Right?
It
Masculine.
would be easy to say that it actually is an active participle.
Active. Parts.
Yeah, so that was a little bit challenging there. That's actually just a cal active participle in construct with Elohim, and it's so and he and a fearer of God, and fearing God, and then sar is also an active participle. So, and how did you translate? What was the root of sar there? Trilateral root, and what does it mean?
Oh, it means to turn, and I also have a page number for that one.
Good, yeah. I think it's 693, probably, right?
Yeah, that's what I have marked.
Yeah, and that's an active participle too. So and fearer, and a fearer of God, and a turner from evil, basically, is what it's saying.
Yeah, this one also has it marked with Job.
Okay, good. Okay, so that was Job's character, a wonderful thing for us to emulate. Do you have any questions about that verse, besides the ones we talked about already? Those two were kind of challenging, the we, ra, and wasar. Now, one reason I was able actually to give you this verse is because they were participles, and they weren't, wows on verbs doing some kind of something that you don't know about yet, with narrative sequences which you haven't learned yet at that point. Okay, any other questions about Eov 1:1?
I don't think so.
I think Job probably wrote the book under inspiration later. So, but I mean, if he didn't, it's still God's word. But I think he did. So when we have Eov 19:25, why don't you read that in Hebrew and then translate it?
Wa'ani yathati
Yathati.
Goeli Hai Wa'acheron El Afar Yakum.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What does that mean?
And I know my Redeemer is living and coming after me. I put in brackets. He shall stand on earth.
Okay.
I put the me in brackets because of page 31.
Because of page 31
of BDB.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Huh. What does page 31 of BDB say? No, I really need to go get my lexicon here. So I'll be right back. Feel free to start working on the next verse there, from lesson 23 if you want, and I will be right back and just get my lexicon here. It won't be very long. So 31, we have acharon here. Adjective from acher, come after. The top of page 31, they that came after. Oh, acharon al afar yakum. Yeah, okay. I see why you did it.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, BDB are their theological liberals. So Job can't possibly be talking about. See, he makes the Goel. BDB thinks the Goel isn't like the Messiah. The Goel is just somebody later that's going to come along and think, wow, Job was really a good guy. See, so yeah, it's yeah. I see why you did it. And obviously BDB's Hebrew is better than yours at this point. But I would say for that last clause, the Acharon al Afar Yakum, Well, let's parse Yakum. What is, well, I gave you the parsing for Yakum. So that's a Cal imperfect 3ms of kum, meaning he shall stand. So you could say and afterwards, well, afar. What is afar in the lexicon?
In the lexicon?
Or yeah, what is afar? I mean, you said earth, I think, right?
Yeah.
Did you look that up?
I must have.
You must have. It's page 779.
Okay. I didn't mark it on my page because I didn't have doubts on it.
Yeah. Afar is lexicon says dry earth or dust. So yeah, it's the earth. Earth could be dust too, but yeah, dry earth or dust. So he will. So the goel. And afterwards upon the earth he will stand or arise. And that's the goel. So the goel, the Redeemer, will stand in some time. I think acheron is like a temporal. So afterwards, upon the earth he will stand. So the goel, Job's goel, is going to stand upon the earth at some point in the future here. Now, what is Yadati? Can you parse that too?
It's imperfect, first person. No, wait, it would be second person.
The yod might, maybe you're thinking of the imperfect and everything like yiktov, tiktov, tiktiv, yaktov. What's the trilateral root for this word, though?
Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yadat. So that's just part of the root consonant. The yod is just a root consonant.
Okay, so it's perfect first person, masculine singular.
Yeah, first person common singular, because there's no masculine feminine in the first person, cal. So it's a cal perfect first common singular from yada, meaning I know. So since yadati on its own means I know, why is there the ani on there as well? Because yadati on its own is I know.
Oh, any, why any? Why is it?
Yeah, I mean, why didn't he just say yadati? Why did he say ani yadati?
Because Hebrews talk that way.
Is he that way? Yeah. It's probably somewhat emphatic. Oftentimes, if you don't need to have it and you supply it, it's probably emphatic. Job is making a statement of faith here, and I think this is emphatic. I know.
So he says, and I know.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay.
You wouldn't need to translate I twice, but it is somewhat emphatic by expressing the ani.
So it's kind of like verily, verily.
It's something like, yeah. I know that my Redeemer lives. Chai. What does that mean? Chai.
Chai, living.
Living. Okay. Do you know what the parsing for that is?
Living would be.
I actually should have told you a little bit about that, because the reason that there's a. You have a pen on you? I'm going to write this in. Right for a second. The reason it's a comet is because underneath right next, see that the little wishbone thing? That's the athnak, which we were talking about a little bit earlier here. That's the accent athnak, which is the main pausal divider. And as Lambden will teach you, I think, second semester. Thank you for the pen. As Lambden will mention second semester, the athnak actually can lengthen certain vowels. So here you might expect he with a pathak, but it has a comet because of the accent. So sometimes with that particular accent as the main pause in the verse, the shorter vowel becomes a longer vowel. So it's the masculine singular adjective, che, living. So I know my Redeemer is alive. Supplied verb is, goel is Redeemer, che is alive, or lives alive. Go Ali, what is go Ali?
Wait, where are we? Oh, okay. Go Ali is my Redeemer.
Sure. And what is the parsing for that?
It would be first person.
Yeah, that was a tough one too. I should have given you the little bit more info on that one too. That it's a cal active participle with a suffix on it. We haven't actually had participles with suffixes. Have we had participles with suffixes?
I don't know.
We've had nouns with suffixes. I know we've had normal nouns. I don't think we had I don't know. Let me know later if we've had any actual substantival participles that you stick suffixes on.
I don't know.
You can't think. Doesn't ring a bell at all?
I don't know. There's not a big emphasis on parsing with Lambda. That's why I
well, you gotta memorize those things anyway. Even though he doesn't have you write, the fact in the homework there isn't write out this, doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So if you should go ahead and pick a first guttural verb and write all the forms of it. That would still not be a bad idea. So yeah, I don't know if we've had those or not. I should probably give you that one too. But that's a cal active participle with the first common singular suffix on it. From the trilateral root is ga'al. Did you look up ga'al?
I think I looked it up in the back of Lambda, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, it's on page 145 in BDB. It's an interesting verb. Are you there?
Yep.
So notice ga'al is to redeem or act as a kinsman. So it's a kinsman redeemer. And you see redeem by payment, and so on. So it's a redeemer, but so actually I think Job is anticipating, Job is expressing his faith that in a coming day the Messiah would be his redeemer. He'd be saved by the Messiah. And the Messiah, because the goel is a kinsman redeemer, the Messiah would have to be human. He would have to have the identical nature with him, because he's a kinsman redeemer. So the one who has my nature will be my redeemer, and I know that this one is living now. My redeemer lives, and in a future day he is going to stand upon the earth. And that was that strengthened Job to get through the difficult trial. And then he knew that he was in the future going to see God as well someday in his flesh. So, I mean, that's what Handel's Messiah said about it. Yeah, I think it's one of Handel's Messiah, Job 19:25. And we have the hymn about it too. But so it's a great expression of Job's faith in the incarnation of the already extant Messiah, who would be his redeemer. Any questions about Job 19:25?
I don't think so.
No, that's a great verse. Okay, Shemuel Beith. What book of the Bible is that?
2 Samuel.
2 Samuel, Shemuel, Aleph, 1 Samuel, Shemuel, Beith, 2 Samuel.
You want me to read it?
Sure.
Okay. Ruach, Yehovah, Deber, be Rumila
Umilatho.
Umilatho El Lashoni Amer Elohe Yisrael Li Deber Tsur Yisrael Moshe Ba'aram
Ba'adam.
Ba'adam. Okay, yeah. Sethik Moshe Yerath Elohim.
Tov mode. Okay. And what does that mean? Don't read it too fast because I need to follow what you're doing.
Okay. The Spirit of Jehovah is in me, and his word is on my tongue. The God of Israel said to me, he said, the rock of Israel rules, in the man righteously. He rules with the fear of God.
Well, I can tell that you are not just looking at the King James and copying it, your translation, so that's good. And that's not bad. This was a challenging verse. This was challenging, so that wasn't too bad. A few things to tweak here. Diber, Ruach Yehovah Diber bi. I think you said he is or something in me or something. Is that what you said?
Jehovah, the Spirit of Jehovah is in me, and his word is on my tongue.
Now, Diber, davar, means to speak, not to be. It's not haya, it's davar. And I'm going to give you a footnote there. You don't need to know what a PL is, but davar there is, notice it says, footnote 11, PL per 3ms of davar, meaning he spoke. So the Ruach Adonai is the subject of the verb davar. So the Spirit of the Lord spoke, and then davar gets the B, so you could say in me, something like that. But it isn't just is in me, it's the Spirit of the Lord spoke by me. Can you see that?
I think so.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You can see, in other words, davar is the diber means he spoke, not he was. Something like that.
When I look at, like, I have the Hebrew written out and then my English right underneath it, and then underneath all of that I have how I try to make it sound like a verse.
Okay.
So when I'm reading what it tried to make it sound like a verse instead of reading like my interlinear looking.
Okay.
But yeah, when you say that, I'm looking at the interlinear looking style, and that makes more sense than what I'm looking at of my trying to make a verse.
Yes, so Ruach Adonai, Ruach Yehovah is the subject, Debar is the verb, so the Spirit of the Lord, Spirit of Jehovah, spoke, be, in me, mulatho. What is mulatho?
I have in his word. Mulatho.
Good. Yeah, and notice that's not davar, not the common word for word. This is a different word, but yeah. And you know what the parsing for that? Did you happen to write that down?
No, I didn't write any parsing down. I didn't know I should.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad idea. It's a feminine singular noun with a third masculine singular suffix on it. And it means his word. Al is upon. Lashoni. What is Lashoni?
My tongue.
Good. Lashon is a tongue with a first common singular suffix, so my tongue. So, and his word was upon my tongue. So the Spirit of Jehovah spoke by me, in me, and his word was upon my tongue. There's no verb was there. The verb there is implied. So you could say the Spirit of the Lord spoke in me, and his word upon my tongue. But there's implied was there. Okay. Now I forgot how you did the first. Can you read your translation for the first part of the second verse again?
Okay. The God of Israel said to me, he said, the rock of Israel rules.
Okay. There, the accentuation makes it somewhat more obvious, but the first part is good. So Elohe Yisrael. Elohe, is that a construct or an absolute form?
Construct.
Good. So Elohe Yisrael is the God of Israel, which is what you said, which is good. And then Amar is the verb, the subject of which is the God of Israel. So the God of Israel said, and then li, to me. So the God of Israel said to me. And then actually, Tsur Yisrael. Tsur is rock, which I think is what you said, right?
Yep.
And that's construct too. Now it's masculine singular noun in the construct with Yisrael, Israel. So in the rock of Israel, there actually, the rock of Israel is the subject of Deber again. So it's not, the God of Israel said to me, the rock of Israel must rule, or something like that. It's actually the God of Israel said to me, the rock of Israel is the subject of the verb again. And so, the God of Israel said to me, Elohe Yisrael, God of Israel, Amar said to me, Li. Sur Yisrael is the subject of Deber. So said, the rock of Israel. And there's a pause, like a comma. And then what the rock of Israel said is the stuff from Moshe onwards. So it's, the God of Israel said to me, comma, the rock of Israel said, comma, the rest of the verse. You see that?
Yeah.
And the accent, like, again, notice under Yisrael, there's the athnak, which is the main pause. So, comma. But of course, you didn't know that. You didn't know anything about the accents at this point. But that does help you, to an extent, see that that's where the, break is. So the rock of Israel said, and what did the rock of Israel say? He said, Moshel ba'adam tzaddik. Moshel yirath Elohim. What is Moshel?
Rules.
Okay, what is the parsing for Moshel?
Okay, it would be a participle.
Good. And you don't know passive participle, so it's going to be active participle. Is it masculine singular, masculine plural, feminine singular, feminine plural?
It looks like it's singular.
Good. Just the masculine singular, like kothav, kotheveth, kothavim, kothavoth. Remember that? So it's like kothav, except here there's a cholam wow instead of just a cholam, but it's still the masculine singular participle. Sometimes that happens. You actually have the cholam wow instead of there's the cholam. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and what, the trilateral root is what?
Mem, Sheen, Lamed.
Good, yeah. Mem, Sheen, Lamed, which means rules. So, Moshel ba'adam. Ba'adam is, you have the preposition baith, and then adam is, there's the article hiding underneath the baith because of the commas underneath the baith. And then adam is man or mankind. So the ruling, you could say it's something like, if you're going to be hyperliteral, the ruling over men one, tzaddik, he must be just. Tzaddik is just or righteous. So the ruling over men, righteous, Moshel, again, ruling, cal active participle. Yirath Elohim, the fear of God, with implied in. So the God of Israel said to me, the Rock of Israel spoke, the ruling over men one must be implied just, ruling in the fear of God. Yirath Elohim. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does? Okay. So we can learn a lot from that, of course. That was a challenging verse, somewhat more challenging. One theological thing I'd like to point out is, who is the speaker in verse 2? Who's actually speaking?
God is.
Sure. Okay. And specifically, verse 2 says who's speaking. I think it is God, but who does verse 2? Who is the subject of Diber in verse 2? Not in verse 3 yet. In verse 2.
Oh yeah. Okay. The Spirit.
Good. The Ruach Adonai, the Ruach Yehovah. So the Ruach, we can see, can speak, which shows he's a personal being. He's not some kind of impersonal force. He's actually a personal being who gave David this prophecy. So he's not an impersonal force. The Ruach Adonai in the Old Testament is a personal being who can speak, who has intellect, who can reveal things because he actually has those things. Who's the speaker according to verse 3, though? Verse 2 says the one who gave this prophecy in 2 Samuel 23 was the Ruach Adonai, but who is speaking in David according to verse 3?
Elohe Israel.
Yeah, the God of Israel. So the Spirit of Jehovah is identified as the God of Israel. So this looks like a text indicating the deity of the Holy Spirit. The Spirit of the Lord is identified as the God of Israel. So looks like pretty Trinitarian to me. Any questions about 2 Samuel, Shemuel Beth 23:2-3?
I don't think so.
No? Okay, great. Well, you have some exciting sentences for next time. A few more because as your Hebrew gets better here, but they're very exciting. Let me see what time it is. Okay. Because of some of the delays with the camera, we still have a little bit of time left here, so let's do a few exercises, and we'll be done. And with those 3 lessons that were kind of a bear, it probably is a good idea to try to do a few exercises here. I don't remember what the word bear is in Hebrew. It's not common enough for me to remember.
So is there something that I could have help for parsing or practice on that?
Like to see, like if you're copying it out to see if you did it right? Anything? I wouldn't mind if you could show it to me. I wouldn't mind looking at it. Also, I actually have. Yeah, he doesn't have you just like as an exercise write out. No, not at all. Which would be good to do.
Yeah. See, when I was talking to Luke, he was saying that there's like a big emphasis.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. I'll see if I actually can get a few. I'm going to look. I have a few other grammars. I'll look at a few of those and see if I can actually give it. I can just like photocopy part of the grammar with the answer key, and so you could just try to do that and then take a look and see if you did it right. I would say that hopefully, if you look at the actual forms, you could see if you did it right too. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to just copy a bunch of them out either. That would be a good idea. So thank you for them. Thank you for the suggestion. Because if you memorize it, then you'll know you did it right. I mean, if you look at the form, you can't recognize the form. You also know maybe I didn't get this yet, but yeah, writing it out is probably a good idea. I want to try a few of these exciting segolets, and at least one with a narrative sequence thing here. So there's one of these exercises that's actually testing this. 24. Okay, actually, just so we get a sense of how, go ahead and do 24A, number 1, and then let's try, we'll do a little bit of B here. So A, this is to see if you kind of get this narrative sequence thing. So go ahead and tell me if you can try to translate number 1, and I can try to help you with it too. Yeah, there you can just read it in Hebrew, and then that's just English, so you don't necessarily need to write it in English on the board. When you're doing it the other way, yeah, we'll write the Hebrew on the board. Hopefully people watching this will have English that's good enough that they will know what it would be on the board.
Okay. A1. You want me to read it in Hebrew?
Sure.
Haragu eth melkenu
Wayik baru.
baru otho mihutz la'ir.
All right, Tov mode.
And that is, they slayed our king, and they buried him outside the city.
Good. And it'd be they slew. You don't say they slayed.
Slew.
Yeah, it'd be they slew. So they slew, they killed our king. Why did you translate Wayikbaru with a past tense when it's an imperfect?
Because it's converted.
Good. It has a wow conversive, so it has this, even though it's imperfect, it has the sense of the perfect. And they buried him, mechutz, outside the city, La'ir. And of course, you know that it's the city because of the commas underneath the lamed. Good. That's correct. So I think that's how that converted thing works. It's not really that complicated.
No.
Let's try, go ahead and try writing up on the board 24b. Do 1 and 2 the way that it said his book, his books, his money, his gold, and repeat the proceeding for her instead of his. And you can put those up on the board. Oh, I think this is yours too. I need to give this back to you. This is your copy there. Oh, this is just a random plug. I'll give the plug to the video while you're putting that up. So this has absolutely nothing to do with this exercise, but a nice crutch, if you want one. You can't use this book for class, and I think it's even out of print, but you can do the same thing by just printing out, like getting a Bible software program with parsing. But the analytical key to the Old Testament, which is a 4-volume set, it's nice when you get to the point where you can read Hebrew on your own. Just as an example, and I'll show you this later. Just like what it does for each verse of the Bible is it has the Hebrew there. It tells you all about the word and tells you what page in BDB it is. So like here, U Shema Tem, it tells you that's has a conjunction, the wow. It's a caliperfect, second masculine plural. The root forms on page 1033 of BDB even tells you what it means. And it does that for each word. So this is a great crutch when you get to the point where you can read the Bible on your own. And if you can also if you have a Bible software program that has the Hebrew Old Testament on it, you can also, with Accordance you definitely can. I'm sure you can with BibleWorks. You can probably do it with Logos too. You can just print it out too. So then if you're reading the Bible in Hebrew on your own, you could get something very similar to this as a crutch in case you can't figure out what a word is. And that's a nice thing. You can't use that for class, but it's nice to be able to do that. Okay, back to the lesson here, 24b. I wanted to erase the wow conversive and the wow too. The endings are correct, and that is very good. Now, Sefer is a segolet, and so it does what page 109 does. Actually, that was a nice one to pick. It actually gives you the exact forms, because it's the example. Yeah. So Sefer is one of those type C ones. Where did the tsere come on the sif underneath the resh on that first form? Yeah. Why did you put a tsere there? Probably because you're looking at the wrong one. Yeah, that's very possible, yeah. The sif, yeah, that's it. Sif row is it. So the part that, with the suffixes, you know, you have, like on sefer, you have sifri, sifraha. So you're sticking the suffixes on the sif thing. So it's sif, and then you have the resh, and so sif row is your set. Well, now look on the last column, the plural with suffixes on 109. That's because here, this is a plural, right? Yeah, his books. Okay. So now we're looking at that third column, plural with suffixes. So it would be like, so you have, I guess there is a sifare. It'd be sifar. It's the suffixes that are on page, whatever page that is. It's the suffixes on page 89, like susei, suseiha, susaic, susai, suseiha, suseinu, etc. So you're gonna you have the yeah, you've got the I, so that's good. But in the actual form itself, it just has the shawa comets like on sifare. So it would be sifare, sifaraka, sifarayak, sifarai. It'd be kind of like on davar on page 89. Yes, it would be sifarai. Yep. Well, notice on the example he gives, on the sifare, the my books, notice it's a shawa underneath the first consonant. It's that fourth column. So it's like that one, sifare, and you just add the suffixes. Boy, that is small. I know. You add the suffixes like on that. So it's like page 89. It's like it's similar to this. Those suffixes are the exact suffixes, and what you're adding it to is, for the plural, is that one. Yes, good. Sifarai. That would be his books. I'm glad we're doing one of these. Now let's see if we could make it her book and her books. Good, yeah, that is her books, though there's a few vowels to stick on it, obviously. But. Sifar Reha. Yes, except that you're missing something on the suffix now. Good, yeah. Sifareha, good. That is her books. Sifra. Good. Sifra is correct. I don't know if we have time to do one more or not. Where's my watch? We do? Oh. Well, yeah, we can do, let's do number 2 as well. No, because it's normally 8 to 11, but then we started closer to 9. So, yeah. So, I'm not going to go to 1, no. Could, I suppose. Yeah, I better look. Let me see what you're doing here. This is what everyone's interested in. His money, his gold. Yeah, money is kesef. Gold is zahav, not zahar. Yeah.
Okay, so this would be his money and his gold, both singular. Alright, so it would be
And of course, they're seglets again.
regular.
Let me read you actually on in the answer. I'm going to read this to you about the seglet nouns here. He says, amongst other things, he's talking about this exercise in the book. This exercise gives practice in the use of the pronominal suffixes with seglet nouns. We have already noted when dealing with a construct state that these nouns form a class of their own. See the comments on exercise A of lesson 16. In the plural, they go very much like other nouns such as davar. The only difference is that when the rule of shawa has to be applied, the short vowel to be supplied is not always hirak, but is the same for each word as that already learned for the construct plural. See the introduction to exercise A of lesson 18, land on page 78. Thus we have forms like mal kekem as well as sif rekem. It is with a singular noun that the real differences emerge, as Lambden clearly explains in paragraph 99. One helpful factor is that the short vowel of the first syllable is the same as that already associated with each word in this class. Note that since this word is properly closed, hence the dagesh in malki, there's no question of the use of middle shawa, and that forms the second person plural suffix. So in the plurals, they're just pretty much like davar. In the singular, they do what is where the differences are, and then, it's what Lambden said. So hopefully that's a little bit helpful. So kesef and here, get the mic behind you.
So there's really no way to tell whether it's like melek or kever.
The way is, you look on page 109, and on page 109, he tells you of the nouns learned thus far. He tells you beneath A, B, C, D which ones are like A and B. But on its own, if he didn't tell you, you would not know whether it's A or B. I think in the seglet nouns in the future, he tells you, or he gives you in the vocab or in the back or somewhere so you can tell. But for the ones you've learned up to now, he tells you right there on page 109 that all of them have the characteristic path except kever and sedek, which have hirak.
Okay.
So it's like melek.
All right, so then this would be... This would be 2. Okay.
Yeah, it's kaspo, that's good, though you need some dagesh lanes in there. Kaspo, good. And then there's also in the cough, too.
Oh, there.
And actually, I'm sorry, Zahav, there's no segels in there. Wait a sec. Zahav.
No, there's not.
But it is
So this would
a
fall.
second guttural, though. Did he tell you that, or was that the next lesson? It's not. It's not that. Yeah, I'm sorry. Zahav is just a normal, run-of-the-mill noun. It's not segelit. So I misled you there.
Would it need the dagesh there?
No dagesh.
No?
Because it's not a bagad kapat.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
So zehavo, good. And then there's no, because it's not a closed syllable on ha, then there isn't bo, it's zehavo. Good. Tov ma'od. And then can you do her gold? Her silver and her gold.
Her gold would be.
Zehava. Is that how you just made that up? Okay, yeah, it's not quite what we're looking for here. Susi, susaka, susake, suso, susa. Good, yes. And you get rid of that, yeah. Zahava. Yes, zahava.
Her gold would be similarly. With regular stuff. Like that.
Well, that would be pronounced cas. Well, now where the singular, the suffix hasn't changed to a schwa, hey. The feminine suffix, feminine singular suffix is just the ah.
Okay. So it'd still be comet.
Yes. Still be comments. Good. So cas pa. Cas pa. Yes. And then there's the kof needs the dagesh leni. Good. Cas pa. Good. All right. Tovmo. Those are kind of a bear, but hopefully that. I think if we hadn't done that, it would have been a lot worse. So let's see if we can do one. I'm going to try to do 1 and less than 25, and that'll be the last thing here. No, less than 25. Something with an imperative. Yeah, just try number 1 of exercise A.
Translate to English.
Yeah.
Okay. With these teeth. F.
Have the mic.
They seek Jehovah.
How are you parsing Dirshu? You're correct that it's the verb to seek. That's good.
How am I parsing it?
Yeah, what form is that?
It's kale, perfect, third person, plural, masculine, verb.
Let's see. Kathav, kathava, kathavta, kathavt, kathavti. Kathavu, kuthavtem, kuthavtem. Kathavu. So here we have Dirshu, though. So it's not a cal perfect third masculine plural like that. Take a look at, remember what's the new stem we're learning today in this lesson here?
Something about
It's the imperative.
imperatives.
Yes. So we're learning imperatives here. In the bottom of 113 you have like the kathav imperative. Kathov, kithvi, kithvu, kathovna.
Oh, yep. All right. That would be plural, masculine, imperative.
Good. It's an imperative masculine plural. So seek ye the Lord. Seek the Lord is what it is saying. Seek Jehovah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so this lesson you have a bunch of imperatives, so
That would make sense.
I think the hard probably hopefully you can get those Seglet ones, and the rest of it I think won't be too bad, hopefully. And the answer key does have useful things that he says.
I never look at that until after I'm done with my homework.
Which is fine, but even when you do though, after you're done, which is good that you don't do till you're done, after you do, it still has useful things that will strengthen. All right, let's read number 6, 24, 26. All right, you can read verse 24, I'll read 25, and you can read 26.
All right. Wavarekha.
Yavarakecha.
Yavarekha. Kecha. Yahovah. Wayish Mareka.
Good. Ya'er Yehovah panai Elaika Wihunaka.
Yehovah Panaiv Elecha Wayasem Lacha Shalom.
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 How did you say the first word
Which one?
of that verse?
Yehovah.
Oh, before that. Did you say Yisa? It's at the very end of that line.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see that one.
Okay.
Yisa.
Yisa Yehovah panai Elecha Wayasem Lacha Shalom. All right. Tov Ma'od.
Snuck in there.
Amen. You are dismissed.